recording here.
How does my mic sound? Does it sound okay?
Good. Yeah, you're actually coming through.
Oh,
Clearly.
great.
I don't know if you changed anything with that, but sound good.
All right. Good. Okay, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2. Hey, everybody, it's JJ French, and you're listening to the JJ French Connection Beyond the Music, brought to you by Podcast One and various incendiary platforms, Apple and Spotify and who knows what else. Before we get started today, I just want to remind you I have a book out, and it's called Twisted Business with my co-writer, Steve Farber. Lessons of My Life in Rock and Roll. It's available through Amazon, like everything else is available through Amazon. I want to thank my friend JC Curley, the chairman of Gibson, who did a great interview with me last week. I got so much great positive feedback. JC, was really great having you, and all my guests have really been great. You know, we try to find people that have direct connection with me, something that I can really like hang on with, and really talk about, something that I have deep interest with. And I get a lot of emails from people who say you should get this guy on and that guy on and this guy on and that person on, male, female. And I'm always looking for some sort of a connection, a reason to have them on. But today we have a really good reason to have them on, because the person that puts up all of our social media stuff is a guy named Tor Caracappa. You may know the name, you may see his name. Tor's a social media guy. He's on with me today. And by the way, today we're filming this thing. It's going to be, I think, on YouTube. I think we're going to start a new thing where these interviews are also going to be available, so you can see the people who I'm talking to. So you have the option of listening to it as a podcast or watching it. So today is going to be the maiden voyage of that, because we're on video. And so that's why you see Tor and you see me. So this all came about because of conversations that Tor had about, hey, why don't we post to the fans, have them ask me questions and have me answer them. So we have a whole ton of them, and we'll see what we get through today. I also just want to remind you, before we get going any further, I'm also available on Cameo. And I write for several magazines, which you may not know, or you may know. I write for Goldmine, a Beatle column, and I write for a magazine called Copper, which is an online audio magazine. It's because my hobbies are online, are on audio, high-end audio, like crazy audio, like oligarch audio. That's what I call it, oligarch audio, because you got to be fucking rich to buy this stuff, because it's like turntables that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and speakers that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not that you have to spend that kind of money, but it's a playground that I know of well, and I enjoy talking about it. I also enjoy talking about watches. We may be getting to that at some point, because I'm fascinated as to why somebody wants to spend $2 million for a watch, when my Casio for $10 works just fine. But, it's crazy. It's a crazy world of Rolexes and stuff you guys have never even heard of, and I'm into that. So there's a lot of stuff. But today it's going to be Ask JJ questions. And with that, hey, Tor, how are you?
Hey, Jay, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
We got a bunch of questions for you today, and I think it's about time. You've been doing this podcast for quite a while, well over 50 episodes, and we're going to kind of interview you now instead of somebody else. And a lot of these questions are, they're a little all over the place. A little bit about the band, a little bit about you, and kind of a lot in between. But we're going to kick off with a question from Jason. A real solid question, one that I would have myself, actually, we've just never talked about. But when deciding who would play a solo on a Twisted Sister song, you or Eddie, how was that decided? Was it a coin flip or some other method? Did you arm wrestle? What did you guys do?
That's a great question. That really is a great question. No one's ever asked that before. And that's a really good one. So first of all, Eddie and I go back to high school. So we went to George Washington High School together, and we came through the music business together. After high school, Eddie joined several bands that had a certain particular Latin feel to them. And El Toro was one, SPX was another, made up mostly of Hispanic guys who played rock. But I guess because in those days, Santana was very hip, and a group called Malo, which was actually Santana's brother. So they mixed kind of a Spanish flavor into rock music. But Eddie and I grew up, Hendrix and Clapton and the Beatles and all that, and Led Zeppelin. And we played Led Zeppelin together in high school. But Eddie's a very studied guitar player. Like, Dee calls him fingers, but I really call him Steady Eddie, because he's the kind of player I wish I could be. It's just not me. I'm too freeform, like jazzy. If I'm having a good day, it's great. And if I'm not particularly having a good day, it's not particularly that great, and I can practice all day long, but I don't have the technical chops that Eddie has to be able to reproduce his stuff very, very specifically. So as the band was evolving, there were certain kinds of songs that fit me and certain kinds of songs that fit Eddie. And we kind of just knew it by hearing it, oh man, that's like an Eddie solo, or that's a JJ solo. JJ, you go crazy on that one. And Eddie, we need like a precisely built solo over here. And Eddie's really good at that. I mean, I watch our Twisted Sister DVDs, or our live stuff online all the time. And I hear me and I go, yeah, I'm having a good night. Oh, I'm not having a good night. Oh, I'm having a good night. Oh, I'm not having a good night. I'm sloppy. I'm ahead of the beat. I'm behind, whatever. But Eddie's on it. He's just on it. He's just that guy. And I think every band needs one of those guys. And Eddie is that guy. I mean, I couldn't do The Price, Eddie, Ben, that's like an Eddie thing, that's like Leslie West living through Eddie Ojeda. It's really super precise and heavy and tone. Also, Eddie's a tone guy, and I don't have the patience to be a tone guy. I should be a tone guy, but I'm not. I just plug into an amp. But Eddie's like, no. There's sounds there. And so Eddie programs all of our amplifiers, and he also programs my tone when I make a record. That's how much I trust him. I trust him and Mark to figure out how I should sound. I know it sounds weird. I'm not trying to be lazy. I just don't have the mindset to sit there and go through like 20 amps and 20 heads. Like, just get me the fucking sound. Let me just get on with it, And Eddie will sit there and he'll ruminate on this stuff because it matters to him. That's why he can program my Kemper, tone modeling preamp that we've been using in the last couple of years before we retired, because he has that. So that's kind of like really the gist of it all. I mean, here's what's a kind of interesting thing. Eddie's solos are on our hit singles. My solos are on all the album title tracks. So in other words, I'm the solo of Under the Blade. I'm the solo of You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. I'm the solo of Stay Hungry. I'm the solo of Come Out and Play, which is kind of interesting. I am the solo for those songs, for the title songs of the song of all those records. But Eddie is on I Wanna Rock, and he's on, We're Not Gonna Take It, and I'll Never Grow Up Now. And although I was the solo on Bad Boys of Rock and Roll, but Eddie's solos, because his solos are so famous in the context of these songs, that people go, oh, he's the lead guitar player. And when they say it, it doesn't really bother me. Everyone does a different role in the band. My role is much broader, as It's not just a guitar player, it's a manager. I'm doing a million other things. And Eddie can concentrate on the music. And he's, like I say, he's a monster player. So that's kind of like the answer.
Okay, so a side question. When did the decision get made to put, two guitarists on one side of the stage and the bass on the other, as opposed to, most bands that have two guitarists, they'll spread out that sound and put one guitarist on stage left, one guitarist on stage right. Were you guys always like that from day one? Was that thought through?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, nobody wants to stand next to Mark because he just kills you. I mean, really, like, I stood next to Mark, and the joke is, my little note would come out of my Marshall, like beep, 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 and Mark's note would come out like, it's like a Jaws next to a goldfish. It's just not fair. It's really not fair. So when we got together, we could hear each other better, and we could concentrate on getting the guitars tight. I think Priest, when we played with Priest, that's when the guitar tones really came together in 1979 when we played with them. We had a great show with them. We did really well, but we were brought onto the bill because we were the biggest club band in the tri-state area. So of course we're going to be on the bill with Judas Priest to help sell tickets. And we sold out the Boardwalk down in Asbury Park. But as good as our tone was, when I heard Priest's guitar players, KK and Glenn, there was a unified wall of distorted guitars that just sounded perfect. And I think Eddie and I wanted that, and so we concentrated on developing that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, a lot of times, with doing that, it's not so much the individual's guitar tone that stands on its own. It's the two blended together is what needs to sound good. So alone, they might not sound so great, but when you mix them together, it's when you get that power. And I think that was always the key with those two guitar bands, right?
Yeah, and for us too, because of the way our Marshalls were set up, the 50-watt Marshalls, the 3 cabinets each, people don't understand the art of harnessing ultra loud distorted guitars in a unified way. And there's an art to it. It's loud. It can be out of control if you let it to be out of control. But if you play enough of it to understand the unification of the tones, it's an art.
Sure.
And that's what we did. We kind of we looked at Priest, basically. AC/DC was a more wide open sound. They played SGs and Gretches, and even though they used Marshalls, the sound palette was broader. Humbuckings, the way me and Eddie are aligned, are very much kind of in a funnel, for lack of a better way to describe it. I think that, and look, AC, if you look at Priest and AC/DC, they really define who Twisted Sister is, whether it's the kind of songs that Dee writes, like Shooting Down, that's an AC/DC song, So he either writes like AC/DC type songs, or he'll write Priesty type songs. They had a real effect on the band, and we just chose the Priest kind of a thing. And so it's been that way for years. But like I said, nobody wants to stand next to Mark, because my God, you need a fucking kidney belt to stand next to him. It's like staying next to 18 Harley Davidsons. It's really abusive, He's very abusive. So he is audibly abusive. He's a motherfucker too. Oh, by the way, when I did stand next to Mark a long time ago, and one night at a club called Detroit, Mark smashed his bass, like he hit the bass because he was next to Tony, the drummer, and his neck of his bass broke off and hit me in the chest. So Mark is, he's playing his bass, he hits the bass, animal, and the neck just breaks off and literally flies across and smacks me in the chest in the middle of a guitar solo. I get hit with this thing, and I look down, it's the headstock of Mark's bass.
Right on.
And I think that was also a decision. I said, I should be away from this guy. Get me away from him.
Right, because when you watch a lot of that early stuff, we don't see you or Eddie really venture over to that side of the stage just to even do a solo or say hi to that side of the crowd or whatever. It's just a little too much for you,
It is to stand in front of Mark. It is a bit much.
Right.
No, really, it is. It's a joke. My little Marshalls. I can have 20 Marshalls. They go beep 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 beep, and Mark goes, roar. Right. In fact, when we did the Come Out and Play tour, Mark, I think, had 8 18-inch speakers and 6 15-inch speakers. I mean, can imagine what that shit was like.
Oh my
we
God.
built this house, for those of you who saw the show, and there was there's a part in Burn in Hell where Eddie and I are walking up the stairs of the, quote, brownstone building, and we're above Mark. We're standing above his bass rig, and trying to hear yourself is a complete waste of fucking time. I mean, it was just, you could have all the monitors you want, but it wouldn't help you.
Well, we're going to talk more about the Come Out and Play stage setup a little later, but in the meantime, we're going to talk about a little bit more about Come Out and Play, the album. Here's a question from Jerry. He asks, I recently heard you talk about that you'd wanted The Fire Still Burns to be the lead-off single for Come Out and Play. His question is, what was the sentiment among the rest of the band regarding that? And how did it ultimately get settled?
There was so much pressure to follow up Stay Hungry. Enormous amount of pressure. Not to mention that Dee had a fight with the president of the record label, who had no intention of helping the band because he wanted us to go back with Tom Werman, who produced Stay Hungry, because why not? He produced the hit record, and why not? And Dee and Tom didn't get along, and we had a problem with Tom. So therefore, we wouldn't go back, and that created a whole other set of just crazily messed up issues. Okay. First of all, Dieter Dierks is no slouch. Scorpions producer, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Top line producer.
Sure.
But we were under such pressure to be commercial again, and that was a mistake. That was absolutely a mistake. The band had become connected to this kind of goofy rock image. Looking back at the 80s, I call there's a goofball rock era. And what that meant was, to me, that there were bands like the Bangles and the B-52s. These are like really gimmicky bands with hit records, but with goofy kind of premises, and goofball stuff like that tends to be like very rich chocolate. Like it's really satisfying to eat it, but then it's like then your insulin blows up and you die of insulin poisoning, and and glycogen poisoning. So what happens is we got obsessed with the MTV thing, and so when we were thinking about songs to do, Leader of the Pack. This is the weird thing about Leader of the Pack. People say, why did you do Leader of the Pack? Well, we used to play it in the bars. And in the bars, there was never a problem. Nobody ever thought it was stupid. We just did it with Ladies Boy and, Come Back and Under the Blade and Can't Stop Rock and Roll. And, I Cry and, and Priest songs. And we'd throw in Leader of the Pack. And it worked. It was funny and it worked. And then at one point, we brought a motorcycle out on stage at the Palladium and that worked. Priest brings out motorcycles. No, that works, right? So it worked. And so we never thought that doing it was a mistake. Doing it wasn't the mistake. Releasing it as the single was the mistake because it just wasn't necessary to release a cover song, a song like that with a video like that at a time like that. Had we done the right thing, which is release Fire Still Burns, or another heavy track, or come out and play and establish the band as a super heavy band, which is what we were, then we could have always reapproached it later on had the record been a hit. But it was just the wrong record, and it was the wrong video, and it was the wrong message. I mean, I've said it a million times, but at the time it didn't seem wrong. At the time, you don't know what it's like to sit there with the record label's expectations, shipping a 500,000 copies the first day, people don't know what that's like, and I don't blame them. It's because it's never going to happen again. That whole that world will not ever happen again because of the nature of the record business and the way consumers buy stuff. Never happened. But yeah, it was a mistake. We had so many better songs on the record. And look, Be Cruel to Your School. There's two gimmicky songs in a row. Not good. There were two gimmicky songs in a row. Right. And seeing that we left off Stay Hungry with The Price, which was without makeup, it was, like an in-concert performance of a great ballad, which should have gone number one. And the record label was a great video. And the record label was so intent on get over the record. Let's get the new record out. Let's capitalize on it. That's what we need to do. We need to capitalize on it. There's a lot of misdirection. Look, at the time, I wasn't managing the band. We had political issues in the band between Dee and the band and me and the producer and the record label and the manager. And I had checked out in a way. And I just said, let the fates decide. And if it's going to be, it's going to be. But this goofball rock era, Van Halen could have fallen into the same problem because David Lee Roth is a great showman, but he's a goofball. Yeah. And because Eddie Van Halen is such a monster genius, and the band was so monstrously good, they could rescue themselves from Goofy Dave. So they were able to take advantage of a lot of things. Dave was goofy. He was also very sexy. He was a frontman with a lot of women liked him. He was a good singer, no doubt. They had good songs, but he could have led the excess to the goofball side of Van Halen, but he didn't, because Eddie rescued him because of Eddie's genius. Right. He's an absolute genius. Yeah. But the B-52 stuff, the Walk Like an Egyptian stuff, the Rock Lobster, all that, Devo, it was all fun to watch, but it was like cheap. It was like sugar, know?
Yeah. Well, the 80s, was all about excess. It was all about overdoing it. And, you found that formula, and MTV at the time was such it was its own drug, its own thing where you just couldn't get enough of it. And if we go this high, we got to go this high next time. And
but you know what?
Much more
but
colorful.
Motley didn't. Motley maintained their credibility. Let's be honest. I mean, you can knock it, but let's be real. They maintained some credibility through all of that.
So that's a good point that you bring up, right? Because that specific year was very big on glam, right? It was very big on the pink and the hot pink and the platinum and the white. Like those are the colors of choice for you guys, for Motley. Motley does Smoking in the Boys Room, a little bit more of a rocker, a little less known, a little less, that it wasn't a pop song originally. Leader of the Pack was a pop song originally, so it kind of has that undercurrent to it. Motley followed it up with Home Sweet Home, which was another, ballads were, the flavor of the week, for the 80s. And, it was, you guys were going down a similar avenue and took a turn at some point,
White Lion suffered.
Sure.
By doing the cover of Radar Love, I think.
Oh, yeah, Radar Love. Sure.
And that was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't need to do a cover. And it's so easy to look back now and go, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
But there were some bands just made. Look, did Whitesnake follow up Here I Go Again? Really? Not really. I mean, right. They had their thing. Def Leppard, on the other hand, followed it up with the shit. Def Leppard delivered 2 ridiculously great records back to back. Right. AC/DC delivered, they went from Highway to Hell to Back in Black for those about to rock. We salute you. I'm sorry. Just right. like Jesus, man, unbelievable records. Sure. And Kiss was lost in this period. Kiss wasn't weirdly, Kiss was probably wondering where do they fit in right. now, because they led the whole pack. And then all of a sudden they were dusted and they were no longer in makeup. Right. And they were probably going through this. I know they were, because they did the disco song and that didn't help them. And, and then they probably figuring out somewhere in the middle of all this, I went to see them at the Garden in 86, 87 with no makeup. They had no makeup on. Right. There was a regular, quote, hair band on stage. Mm-hmm. And there was no show. No bombs blowing off, really.
Okay, right. Yep.
But they are what they are, and the Kiss is kabuki makeup, and they're kabuki theater, and Kiss is, they're benefiting right now with their final shows, saying if you want this, right. we're giving it to you, man. More bombs because that's what you want,
But they're not doing the 1985 Kiss.
No, they're doing the 1977.
Their bed is buttered.
They're doing the 1977 Kiss, and they're doing spectacularly well. Sure. There's a lot of controversy right now because Paul was caught, singing to a tape. Listen, when you spend a lot of money to see a show and you want to see the band play really well, and I think the pressure on bands to try to deliver is enormous. Mm-hmm. And when the singers can't do it, they tune down. They keep tuning down until they can't tune down anymore. And then you're stuck with having to possibly, do it. It's a lot of pressure on them. I don't begrudge them. If you don't like it, don't go. That's right. it. The Rolling Stones can't play anymore, but if you love them bad enough that you want to see Keith and Woody, stumble around like extras in Game of Thrones, knock yourself out. They can't play guitar anymore, but it's Keith and Woody, watch them before they die.
Exactly.
This is your last shot to see them before they pass out.
That's
Please
the thing
come.
About being a fan.
It is. Although I got to say, for the Stones, Jagger is a monster. It still remains so. But anyway, we're diverging here.
Right.
The point being is, we made fundamental mistakes. We were under a lot of pressure to make these decisions. We made them, and in hindsight, they were wrong.
Sure. All right. So let's move on to another question. So this one is from Keith. Keith asks, what happened to your guitars you used during the time with Twisted Sister? I love that yellow and black Guild X79 Skyhawk you had during the Stay Hungry era. I've been looking for one for years, but they're impossible to find. I have a pink Starburst Epiphone Les Paul. I have a pink black and white Bullseye with Eddie Ojada's signature, blah, blah, blah. And, he's got this Twisted Sister guitar collection and he can't find the Skyhawk. Whatever happened to yours?
I don't have it. And I have to tell you, it's frustrating because Guild gave me a lot of guitars, a lot of them.
Right.
And they gave me yellow and black. They gave me red and black, and they gave me plain yellow. And they gave me the Starfire thing, the Skyhawk with the X79, which is the come out and play painted guitar. So what I do own of Guild.
That's the one that was white in Be Cruel to Your School.
Yes, it was white and then
painted, right?
Painted it,
Graffiti.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have that one, and I have an all yellow Guild Starfire X79, which I completely forgot I owned, and gave it to my brother when he was on the school. He's a school teacher, and so he went dressed as JJ French for Halloween or something. And I gave him the guitar and totally forgot about it, including my stage clothes for Can't Stop Rock and Roll. And I'm at his house a year ago, and he says, "By the way, I got your stage clothes in a shopping bag, and I have I have one of your gills. I went, what? What are you talking about? My brother gave me back my stage clothes from Can't Stop Rock and Roll. He gave me back my boots, my yellow boots, and he gave me back the X79 all yellow with a battery that's been in there for 30 years. It was a 9-volt and it did not leak. Believe it or not, it did not destroy the guitar. Anyway, I got that back. And then I said to myself, I don't even remember having this guitar. And lo and behold, some fan found photos. I took photos of me playing that particular. So I have photos of me playing it and I got it. Those striped ones, I was a co-owner of a pizza place, a pizza parlor on 79th and Amsterdam Avenues called Mama's Famous. And I gave the owner, Bobby Orfanos, I said, why don't you put the guitar up on the wall? Which he did. And then the place went under, and I wasn't in town and Bobby left and I never saw the guitar again. Oh. Now, Guild, right. the owner of Guild just died, Mark Drange, who brought me in as a Guild player, and he just died after tragic series of events, and it was sad because he gave me a deal when Gibson wouldn't. At the peak of my success, I went to Gibson to get it. I tell the story in my JC Curley thing. I said it's weird. And in 1984, at the peak of Twisted Success, I'd been playing Les Pauls for 12 years. I go to the Gibson booth at NAMM and say, hey, here I am. What are you going to do for me? And they went, I don't know. Where do you live? I'm in Manhattan. We'll go to 48th Street and buy a guitar. That's what they told me. And I was pissed. I was really pissed because at the same NAMM show, Marshall amps, in recognition of the band's enormous success, they were on From Long Island, and Marshall's factory or Marshall's import business was based in Long Island. So they knew us. All the guys who worked there used to come see us. They stopped me at the NAMM show and said, we're so proud of you. We're giving you 6 Marshall stacks. And they don't ever give anybody anything. Ever. So Marshall gave us 6 stacks and Gibson wouldn't give me shit. And I was so angry. I'm walking down the aisle and I met a friend of mine and he said, oh, this is Mark Drange, from Guild. And I said, nice to meet you. I said, fuck Gibson, fuck them, man. They fucked me. And he goes, Gibson wouldn't give you guitars? I'll give you guitars. And he wanted to give me a ton of guitars. And yet I don't have them. So I have no idea where the hell they're out there. They probably gave me 8 of them. I probably have 4 yellow and black stripes and 4 red and black stripes.
Kidding. Oh, yeah. Wow.
I got no idea where they are.
Oh, all right. So they're out there, you guys. Let's look for them. Let's find them.
Someone's got them.
Someone's got them, right? Or a few people got them. All right. So this next question, like I said, we're going to bounce around a little bit. This is a more broad question, but interesting. From Seth, he asks, what stereotypes about hard rock and heavy metal fans do you find to be generally accurate, and which ones do you find to be untrue?
It's impossible to make these stereotypes because people are people and they're all very different. So if there's a body of opinion that heavy metal fans are like pro wrestling fans, right? There's a body of opinion. Now, okay, the thing with the hairband era of metal, when it crashed and burned, there was all the speculation as to why it crashed and burned. That somehow one day everybody woke up and went, it's fake, like wrestling, like it's all fake. It's all puffery and hair but there's nothing. There's no there. Yep. There's no there. And for lack of a better term, that era of hair and metal that exploded from 1980, starting from Quiet Riot, basically starting from Quiet Riot, through, I would say, from 83 to 89 was enormous, probably responsible for selling more records, more tickets to shows than any other genre of music ever. Sure. Saved the music industry, that and MTV. But the turn against it was so severe. And we all remembered that day. It was Smells Like Teen Spirit came out. And that's when basically everyone just said, we suck. And then Beavis and Butthead wore a Winger shirt. And that was the end of Winger. Yeah. You look at these things and you go, how did it all go down? But is it a group think? I've met some very well-read metal fans, and I've met some idiot novels. But that goes with every genre in the world. So look, when they arrest a kid for murder and he's wearing a Twisted Sister t-shirt or a Judas Priest t-shirt, which has happened, it happened with priests, happened in Long Island. Some kid, some devil worshiping cult choked some kid to death, and the guy was wearing a Twisted shirt. So immediately, it's our fault. These are the kind of cliches and stereotypes that hurt you. So I don't know if you can make a grand statement about any one particular kind of person listens to this thing. The people who don't get it will go, oh, it all sucks and you're all a bunch of devil worshiping drug addicts, right? That's it. But that's bullshit too. I mean, that's total nonsense too. And first of all, Kiss never did drugs and we didn't do drugs and Nugent didn't, and we talked about it. I mean, so, why do you have to automatically think that? And then at the same time, are you going to say the same thing about, Jimi Hendrix and the Grateful Dead? Oh, everyone who listens to the Dead is on acid.
Right.
Well, maybe you have to listen to the Dead. I don't know. maybe you have no choice. Maybe actually, I'm sorry. Maybe in that particular case, you have to be on acid. Right. But by the way, I'm going to go see the Dead this summer.
Oh,
I'm actually going to go see them. Yeah, I'm actually going to see them. I haven't seen them since I walked out on them in 1972. So this should be fun. But anyway,
yeah, they're playing Citi Field.
They're playing Citi Field, and our record label president produced their documentary, Long Strange Trip.
Oh, nice.
So he said, "Hey, you want to go to a Dead show?" I went, "Done. I'm there." I'll go. But anyway, I don't know. I think it's easy to paint it with a broad brush, but I don't really know if you can completely paint it with a broad brush.
Understood. Yeah. What point well taken. This next question is from Dennis. Dennis wants to know what is going on with Funko Pop. Let me read the question to you. My question is in regards to the eventual inevitable release of the Twisted Sister / Dee Snider Funko Pop release. I've heard you and Dee mention this briefly, and that there are plans, but not much beyond that. So his question, he says, is in regards to what's really involved in making this happen. Did Funko reach out to you? Was it vice versa? Why aren't we seeing this? The world needs a Funko Dee Snider or Twisted Sister set. Yeah. What's going on?
I think it all began with Dee on Twitter, or responding to somebody on Twitter. I think, don't quote me on that, but of course it's a natural. And the fact that the band has such a resurgence going on, Twisted is so resurgent, it didn't surprise me then when our merch company contacted me and said they're making a Dee Snider one at least. So they sent some artwork to me, and I sent the artwork to Dee and said, "Do you approve?" This was just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Dee made some creative suggestions. I sent the creative suggestions back to them, and they're working on it right now. So it's coming. They want to make everybody as happy as they can in the process. So there was details about the costume, because there were so many different phases of the band. Somebody would say, "Well, I liked you during the come out and play period," or "I like you during the stay hungry period," or "I like you during this," or you can't talk about roll period, or I liked you and as Twisted Sister's bent brother, meaning our alternate ego image, where we're just wearing t-shirts and jeans. So I think they came up with their hybrid version of what they wanted art-wise, and Dee commented, and that's where it's at.
And that's where it's
right
at.
now. Yeah.
So that brings us to a question about licensing in general. So how involved is the band? I mean, obviously, if Funko is doing a Dee Snider situation, they'll send sketches over and Dee looks at them. But how involved are the four of you guys in licensing decisions? Is it something that you unanimously need to agree upon? Has there been things that you haven't agreed upon and things haven't happened?
No, I think the band. If there are images of the band to be used for merchandise, t-shirts, whatever, artwork on cups and whatever it is, everybody has to approve the likenesses. Yeah, I don't sit there alone, but we have a merch company that will say to us, we've been approached by, or we have approached the following companies. They're interested in doing something. Where do you see this fitting into your brand? The band's brand, I mean, the name is probably one of the most famous worldwide brand names. We're sold in 145 countries. Let's be real here. And actually, we're not going to take it. And I Want to Rock are the two most licensed metal songs ever. I mean, I was speaking to a music publisher the other day. I said, "Can you name me one other heavy metal song that has as many sync licenses as Twisted's We're Not Going to Take It?" And they go, "No, it doesn't exist. We are number one." So if people listen to this, if you're not particularly a big fan of the band, it's too bad. We're not going to take it as the world's most licensed song, or heavy metal song. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's in more TV shows, commercial soundtracks. To be clear, not saying covered by, that's Yesterday and, songs like that are covered by other artists. We're talking about songs that are used in commercials, movies, TV shows, soundtracks. We just do these deals all day long. They don't happen in a vacuum. They happen because people approach us. We look at it, see if it makes sense, and then negotiate the rights. We're part of the negotiation of the rights, the use of the song. Sure. We don't own the songs, which is a complicated thing to get into, but we own the master, meaning the actual. So you have to get our permission to use it,
right,
and pay us,
right.
In terms of all the other stuff, nothing goes out without if there's an image with Eddie or Mark or D or me, it's because we've all looked at it and said, fine.
Gotcha. Yeah. The interesting thing about those two songs, especially, not only are they iconic anthems, are they just the songs themselves speak for themselves, but they also speak to a time and a place. They're people like to, listen to songs that they grew up with. So there's that factor. They're also the most perfect anthems. I mean, man, they are just, you couldn't find a better formula. Not that they're written with a formula in mind, but they're the songs that you hear everywhere. You hear them at ball games all the time. You hear them at pro wrestling events. You hear them at the supermarket. I mean, that's a broad range. To your point, you're not hearing a Judas Priest song or a Motley Crue song in all of those categories.
No, in fact, if you look at the biggest bands from 73, and we're from the class of 73, so Aerosmith, Priest, Kiss, AC/DC, and Twisted, I'm not going to argue the fact that Aerosmith, Kiss, AC/DC, and Twisted sold more records than us. That's a fact. You can look that up. There's nothing for me to say. However, ask a 10-year-old kid, sing a Judas Priest song or an Aerosmith song or a Kiss song, he's not going to sing it. You ask him to sing, we're not going to take it. The kid's going to sing it. Right. And the reason, or I Want to Rock. And the reason why is because we proactively go out to promote these songs in as many different locations as we can. Some artists go, I'm only going to do it for $8 trillion, or I'm not going to do it at all because it's capitalism, blah, blah. And I go, fine, that's fine. But that's ridiculous as far as we're concerned. Sure. We need it to be used in every different possible location. So if an independent filmmaker needs to use it and they don't have a big budget, we'll figure out a way to get it in there. Because here's the thing. There's 80 million songs out there in the metaverse, and every year there's another 5 million songs that get added to the metaverse. Sure. So with that in mind, why is it that the only songs in commercials are, we're not going to take it, I Want to Rock, Don't Stop Believing, by Fleetwood Mac, Journey, Don't Stop Waiting Till Tomorrow, or Journey's Don't Stop Believing, or really James Brown, every medical commercial, I feel good, da, 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 da. I mean, why is it? There's a million other songs with doctor, give me the news. Right. No one's using it. So the question is, why with millions of songs out there, is it the same 12 songs? And the answer is because people know them. Right. They're comfortable with them. Right. They send a message that's positive. They evoke a good time, and it connects. And the more it's used, the more it's used. Right. So one can say that the ad guys are lazy, but the fact is those ad guys got to be responsible to somebody for generating sales, right? There's
pressure, right?
They're under pressure.
Back to that whole corporate pressure thing, corporate pressure for come out and play, corporate pressure for that commercial to sell that product, So therefore you see these songs happening all the time. And look, in the last 3 years, we've had gigantic sync licenses. They're called syncs. That means synchronization. In the Super Bowl in 2020, we had I Want to Rock for Facebook. Last year, we had Nutrish Dog Food, Rachel Ray's Nutrish company, right? We just did a deal last month for Discover Card. You're going to start hearing we're not going to take it on TV all year until you can't take it anymore. We're not going to take it anymore. And so we need that. And by the way, there's others. There's a TV show, a smaller television called Son of a Critch. They just licensed one of our songs. Another movie trailer licensed it just last week. Like these licenses keep coming up. So now I know you well enough to know that you've got a count of how many sync licenses you have for each of these songs over the years? Maybe you don't have it in front of you right now, but save that for another time if you don't have the information. But it would be interesting for us to know just how many, what's that number?
Well, I got news. What I tried to get right now, but I don't have in front of me.
Yeah.
Is I could read you the names of the corporations that have partnered with us, and your mind would be blown. It is I mean, I look at the line. It all started with Comtrex nasal spray in 1999. That was the first sync license. We have partnered with Comtrex and 7-Up and, Avis. And I mean, it is insane the amount. But here's the thing. I know a certain percentage, but I don't know all, because there's two different master versions of the song. There's the Atlantic version that, the famous one that you hear on the that was the record that you owned for Stay Hungry, and the re-record that we made to be able to use and keep the money ourselves. When Warner Music licenses it, they don't need to ask me, they just need to pay me. So I get royalty sheets, right? And unless I'm actually looking at line by line, I'm not looking at which company has paid them. So I can tell you that whatever I've done, you double that on the Warner side, because they don't have to tell me. They just don't. They just have to pay me. So it's hundreds of TV commercials, hundreds. I mean, it's
over the years, decades.
It's decades, and it's getting bigger and it's crazier, and we love it. It's great, because especially the last 3 years with COVID destroying the touring base of every band, we had Facebook, Nutrish, Discover Card, that pays a lot of bills.
Sure. Well, we go from like the ultra, popular Twisted Sister songs to, let's talk about Under the Blade. So this next question comes from, where are we here? Comes from Pete. Pete wants to know, which is your preferred mix of Under the Blade and why?
So there's a big controversy among fans. We understand hardcore fans love the original. That's what they do. That's what you fall in love with. In fact, you not only love it, you've listened to it. Let's just
clarify. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let's just clarify. Okay. Let's just let a few people know that don't know that there were two versions of Under the Blade. There was the original, that was the Top Secret Records release, and then Atlantic, once Stay Hungry started hitting, re-released it, mixed it for a little more commercial friendly mix, and then that was also put out
and added some songs, took some songs out and added some other songs. Right. So when I heard the remix, I mean, we were involved in the remix, so we thought the remix was fine. We didn't like the particular mix of the first record. We didn't like it that much, but fans fall in love with what fans fall in love with. When you know a record really well, you know how you know a record really well? When you hear another version of it that's just a bit off, and you just know that record so well, it's not the original version, even though anybody else would go, that's the original, but know it's not, because there's something about the sound. And if you've listened to it a million times, there's something about the sound. So the Secret Records version is a very romantic version in my head, because it takes me exactly to the time when we recorded the record down in the southern part of England in a barn. In fact, when we re-released the 40th anniversary coming up this year, it's going to be called Under and Before the Blade. And it's going to be Atlantic is going to release the Secret Records version, right? Exactly the Secret Records master, and demos that we made leading up to the recording of the album that we found in studios all over Long Island that the band has totally forgotten. I mean, I found cassettes of demos demos of the songs on that record recorded at places like Monkey Hill in Douglaston, and in Jamaica, or the Workshop in Douglaston, Bolognese in Merrick, Al Falcone studio in Island Park, Nino's studio. I mean, weird places, Minot Studios in White Plains. I found demos from all these places. The band didn't even remember they were there. Right. And you have to understand why, because we were working all the time. So if we had studio time, invariably you drove early, you did the recording, and then you drove back to Long Island or something, and you played that night. So you don't remember.
And where were the songs initially worked out? Like when were you guys figuring out parts? In the studio or in a garage? Or
no, we would rehearse. So first we had the house in Massapequa. Then we Then we used several rehearsal studios over time in Long Island. There was a place owned by this guy, Jeff, in Hempstead. I don't remember his last name. Nino Studios is famous because Nino's is actually really famous. It was on Grand Avenue in Baldwin. What made Nino so really cool was that Joan Jett, the Stray Cats, and Twisted Sister all rehearsed there at the same time, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Sure.
I mean, Joan Jett hit it out of the park in 1979 with I Love Rock and Roll. Stray Cats came out next, and then we came out after that. And so we all graduated from Nino Studios in Grand Avenue. And probably the longest history of the bands rehearsing and doing demos is probably at Nino's. But we recorded at Bolognese, Electric Lady, Minot, Falcone, The Workshop, and Monkey Hill. And when I found all these tapes and told the guys, they were like, what, who, what, where? Like, they couldn't believe it. Then I had to go to my diaries and find out, match the dates, because there weren't not a lot of dates written on the cassettes. So try to find out which cassette was recorded on what day in which studio. That became important. So that's what's going to be on the second vinyl release. It's going to be a double album. So one album is going to be the Secret Records version. The other record's going to be stuff. Here's what's really the cool thing about the second album. The second vinyl disc is going to have like a half a dozen demos, differently timed, pace, like Bad Boys much slower, You're Not Alone, like totally different. And then we're going to release some live tracks. We're going to release a Zepp medley recorded at a club called Max's when Dee just joined the band, and an Aerosmith medley recorded, I think, at Hammerheads, which I found on reel-to-reel tapes. Our sound man, Charlie, used to record everything, and they're not great recordings, but you want to know what Twisted was like in the bars? You know how tight we were? When you hear us do the Zepp medley from the first album, How Many More Times, Good Times, Bad Times, I think it'll blow you away. It blew. Dee forgot. He listened to it. He goes, "Oh my God, my voice sounds so amazing." I mean, we hired Dee because he sang Zeppelin. That's why we hired Dee.
Sure.
So we have him doing. We did Aerosmith. We do Toys in the Attic, Sweet Emotion, and one other one. I don't remember. Anyway, that's all going to be on the second record. So that package, the 40th anniversary of Under the Blade, that's going to be the next thing released. And then the big question is, what are we doing for the 50th anniversary, which is in 73? And that is a story for another podcast.
Okay.
Because we're thinking
we'd
about
have an exclusive here.
No, we don't know, because I don't know right now. So it'll be a story for another podcast for sure. But, understand that February 14th, 2023 is our 50th anniversary, or my 50th.
It's coming fast.
That's when Twisted Sister was officially named Twisted Sister.
Right.
Valentine's Day, 1973.
And when can everyone expect the Under the Blade reissue?
We're still working on it now. I just found all these photos from the barn, us with the hay bales and all that shit. So we got to get that out to the record label. They got to put the package together sometime, hopefully by Christmas it'll be out.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's exciting stuff. All right. So I've got a question for you. I'm going to throw in a question, being a longtime fan as well. So I can recall seeing, Twisted Sister, and you and I have talked about this a little bit over the years, on the Come Out and Play tour at Radio City Music Hall. And to this day, and that was many, many years ago, and to this day, I have never, ever seen a stage setup as good as that stage. Like that whole city block, West Side Story, ghetto, brownstone with the candy store and the blown out car and the whole thing, the graffiti everywhere, the manhole cover with Dee coming out. It was brilliant. It was just the coolest thing as a young fan I had ever seen. And, listen, prior to Twisted, I was a big Kiss fan. It was all about Kiss in 77 and that giant stage and that gatefold photo of the world exploding. Like nothing could possibly beat that until I saw this. And I was like, holy shit, this is brilliant. And no one ever did it again. And no one ever really, never got its due. And I know that it was never shot. It was never shot video wise, but I wanted to know, where was that concept coming from? Like, how did you guys come up with that? How did it come to be?
That was D.
Mhm.
That was D. The whole idea
Yeah.
of come out and play was the Warriors. Come out and
Warriors. Right.
play. The whole
Yeah.
we tried to get that guy,
Oh,
the guy who played the character in the Warriors. Warriors, come out and play.
Yeah.
And whatever
Yeah.
reason we couldn't get him. I don't know why, because we got so many people to do the album. We got Bobcat Goldthwait, to do the video. We got Clarence Clemens on the album. We got Billy Joel on the album. We got Brian Setzer on the album because Chuck Berry wouldn't do it. Chuck Berry wanted $17,000 in a brown paper bag.
in cash. Right.
Cash. That was his shtick. He said, "Give me 17,000." I think it was $17,000 in a brown paper bag. And we went,
Right.
"No, that ain't happening." So we got, I'm sorry, Brian Setzer ain't chopped liver. Okay.
Right.
Brian Setzer's a monster player.
Yeah.
Clarence Clemens was great, and Billy Joel was great. We had some great people on that record. We couldn't get, we just couldn't get that actor. So D did it. I think the whole thing was, look, D is that he was exploding from a creative standpoint. He wrote great songs, and he had this vision. So the vision took us through Stay Hungry very successfully. So you turn around and go, okay, well, if you got that figured out, maybe you got this figured out too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of put your faith in somebody because he was leading it, and so that's really what it was.
And were you guys like when that came to be, and you did your first dress rehearsal or whatever you did to start that tour and saw the stage, like were you guys impressed, or by then you guys were like whatever?
Everything was big in those days. All the stage designs were big. It was a great stage design.
There was nothing like that.
It was cost a fortune to do it. I think we set it up at where was it? It was not Clear Brothers. It'll come to me, but whatever. It wasn't Shoko. No, it was Clear. I think it was. We set it up in a gigantic hangar, like the way Pink Floyd, would do their thing, or the Stones would do their thing. We finally evolved into that thing, into this monster stage performance, with multiple trucks, and it's very expensive production, really expensive, multiple buses, multiple trucks. It was fun to do it. And the fact that it was never filmed is a crime. I thought for sure we were going to come back after the European tour, which was very successful because the album did very well in Europe. We came back, and I thought we were going to do it again, and we couldn't afford it. Right. We just couldn't afford it.
It's so interesting, handling all the social media. I see a lot of comments and remarks about all the albums, and maybe it's an idea that we should do an album focus show every once in a while and pick an album from the catalog to really kind of dissect. But it's kind of amazing how many people from around the world react to their favorite album, whether it's Come Out and Play or Under the Blade or Love Is for Suckers or whatever the album is. But people latch onto it, and it's their favorite, it's their absolute favorite, and no one's going to change their mind. And so when you say that it's successful in Europe, I've seen so many European residents talk about that album for sure.
Yeah, it was huge in Europe, it just didn't work here because of a backlash in a way. But what, people forget this though. You want to talk about elaborate stage? I think the Christmas stage is the most elaborate stage we ever did. Right. And you want to talk about a fully formed, phenomenal show that was filmed beautifully and is available on DVD, and you could see it, and everything was right on the money. The Christmas performance, the Twisted Christmas, really, what that did was it covered for the loss of Come Out and Play. The Christmas package was an extension of the most theatrical parts of Twisted. Sure. But it stayed hip. Do you know what I mean? Because it was funny, but it was smart.
Right.
It wasn't
and it came
jokey.
Out of nowhere. And it came out of nowhere. It was so unexpected.
It wasn't jokey. It was really well done. And it was thought out with a lot of class. And I stand behind that record. That record's done so well. And the tour, the dates we played, doing that week in Vegas with the show. I mean, the week we did in Vegas, the only two acts in Vegas that week was Cher and us. So you either saw Cher or you went to see us. I mean, that was it. I mean, if you're going to be in Vegas, be opposite Cher, right? I mean, why not?
Sure.
That was fun.
All right. So I've got another question for you, totally off topic. We're not talking music here. But Paul wants to know, he's a marathoner. He's a runner, and he has heard that you were a marathon runner for a while there, and which ones have you run? And he's asking what's your PR if you want to share, and are you still running? Not necessarily marathons, but are you getting out there for a few miles every once in a while? What's your relationship with running?
Okay.
And what was it?
I ran the 81 and the 86 New York Marathon. I ran the 81 on a bet from a club owner named Tony Merlino at Gemini 2 in Yorktown Heights, who saw me reading a running magazine during sound check one day, and he goes, "You run?" I go, "Yeah, I run like 3 or 4 miles a day." He goes, "Do you ever think of running a marathon?" I went, "I don't know. It's 26 miles." He says, "Well, if you run one, I'll give you $100." And then he said to me, "You have to do it under 4 hours." I had no idea what he was saying. I went, "All right, sounds like a good deal." So I bought a magazine called How to Run a Marathon. And I put my name in for the New York Marathon and got a number. And so all of a sudden, I'm seeing, oh my God, the marathon's on October 28th or whatever. And the magazine was How to Run Your First Marathon. And it was like 16-week training run, right?
And what date was this when this was happening? Was it September?
No, I got the magazine in June. So I was able to, extrapolate it out. And into 16 weeks, so when I looked at the first week of the training program, the first week, you run 6 days a week. So you run 3 miles one day, 2 miles one day, 1 mile in one day, 3 miles, 2, like that. Then the second week you run 4 miles, 3 miles, it was like this. But I noticed in week 10, it says on a Wednesday, you run a 15, and we're playing every day. Right. And I'm thinking, how do you
until 4 a.m, right? You're doing sets until like 4 a.m.
Yeah, 4 a.m. Right? How am I going to run 15 miles on a Wednesday and go play the Mad Hatter? Like, how's that going to work? So as the training went on, I got stronger and stronger and stronger. And come that day, to do the 18 miler or the 15 mile on a Wednesday, I did it. I came home. I took a shower. I went and played 2 hours that night. And I went, wow, you're going to do this, right? So then it got up to week 11. I did a 22-mile run or 21-mile run on the Sunday of week 11. And I did it in 3 hours. I went, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready.
And where did you do it? Like, because the New York Marathon is
New York Marathon. So you start at Staten Island, you go through Brooklyn, Queens, across 59th Street
But when
Bridge.
you were doing your practice runs, were you doing it around a track or were you?
Oh, no. I live near Central Park. So the reservoir in Central Park is 1.57 miles around. So you can, I once did 11 loops and I did it, and nothing is more boring than doing 11 loops, but I did it on a day that WPLJ did Zeppelin from A to Z. And at the end of that whole Zeppelin A to Z, that was 3 hours. I never wanted to hear a Zepp record again because I ran 3 hours of listening nothing but Zepp while running 15 and a half miles around the reservoir. But the park loop is 6 miles. So if you understand the park, there's a lot of different loops.
Gotcha.
If you know New York City, and if you run a lot, you really know how long. Sorry, folks, I'm in the witness protection program. That's where you hear these sirens around. But if you run a lot in an area that you know well, you really kind of play games. Like where time is and how you do it. So I was doing really, really well. So here's the deal with the race. Okay. I ran it with my wife's cousin, Mickey, who was a marathon runner from Florida. He came up, and I have a video of me crossing the finish line in New York. And I crossed the finish line. I said to my wife at the time, all you need to do is have a liter of Coke and a box of Entenmann's chocolate donuts for me when I cross the finish line. So I told her. So I crossed the finish line, and she has the liter of Coke, and you see me. I'm eating I'm drinking Coke, eating, and talking to my brother and people. Mickey, meanwhile, the runner, he collapsed. He was in a tent. He was on an IV. I came through it. So what was my time? Okay. My official time was 4:09:22. However, back in those days, you didn't have a chip in your number. So when the gun went off, didn't matter where you were in the crowd, the time was the time. If you were in the back, it took 20 minutes to get to the front.
Right.
So several years ago, I called the New York Marathon, said, I ran the 81 in 4:09:22, and I was in the back of the pack. How much time did it take me to get to the front? They said about 15 or 20 minutes. I said, so I basically did the marathon in 4:50 around there. And they go, without a doubt. If you did the marathon in 4:09:22 and you were in the back, you easily did it in under 4, you know. So that was great. And then the band, you know, this is 81, then 82, 83, 84, things exploded. I would run all the time. And we finally took a break in 86, and I ran it a second time. But I was injured the second time, and I couldn't train running. I had to train on a bike, which is not the same as running.
Sure.
So I was hurting. I did the marathon. I finished it out of pride, but not because it was great. I did it in 4:52, you know. But then shortly thereafter that, I developed bad shin splints.
Oh.
And also, you have to remember, I've been wearing these high heels on stage for years, back compression. So my back started really affecting me. So I stopped running around 93, 94, and I just walk every day. I walk a lot. So I try to walk 4 to 6 miles a day.
Sure.
Because it's wear and tear on your knees and your lower back.
Oh, so. Yeah, sure. And so just to backpedal a little bit, well, so when you finish the marathon in 81, what was the next day or two like? Were you
funny?
Did you have to?
Okay, it's a good question. First of all, I threw a party that night. All right, number one, I threw a party, and I was okay. I came home, took a bath, and then had a party in my apartment. So I was in great shape. I was feeling great. However, it's so funny you should ask me about the next day, because the next day, my sound man, Charlie, was getting married, and I arranged for him to get married by a justice of the peace at 60 Center Street, which is the big courthouse downtown where you see Law and Order. Every time they walk out of the building, after a trial, they walk down those long steps. So the cab pulls up in front of 60 Center Street, and I look at the steps, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to walk. Oh. And I walked up the stairs. I felt like Fred Sanford, you know, Sanford's son, Walter Brennan, you know, it was pretty funny. Yeah, I felt it for a while.
Yeah.
But that marathon, Alberto Salazar set the world record at that marathon for that time, 208:51, I remember. And Allison Rowe won the female at 2:22, I think, set the record. So it was a really record-breaking marathon, the 81 marathon. Sure. And when I hit the wall, and I did hit the wall. So at the 21-mile mark, you're in the South Bronx for a tiny bit of the race. I think they do it deliberately, so you get the hell out of there. You know, I think you just touch the South Bronx. You go over the bridge, you come around another bridge. So at roughly at the 21-mile mark, they had a band, like a funk band, right? And they played this one riff, probably played it for 4 hours, because you heard it as you were running towards them, and you heard it as you were running away from them. So I don't know how long they played it, but you got 5 miles to go. You got 5 miles to go. You got 5. And I heard it in the distance. You got 5 miles to go. You got 5 miles. And then I was running, you know, in Central Park, 5 miles to go. So I get to the park, and I hit the wall, and I'm hurting, but you know, I'm going to finish this race. Like, I'm going to do it. And all I know is that I know the park so well. I know every hill, everything. So I run down the east side of the park, and then I'm crossing 59th Street, you know, and there's the old days, the Coliseum was there. It's no longer there. Now it's the Time Warner building. And there's the Coliseum. I said, just get to the Coliseum. And then there'll be big crowds as you enter the park. And there was big crowds. Well, guess what? There was a lot of Twisted Sister fans at the entrance of the park. And if I was tired, they were screaming, JJ, go JJ. So I was like, yeah, you know, they gave me a lot of
come through.
Yeah, it really came through for me. So I finished it. And that's how so I have a video. One day you come over here, I'll show you. I don't have sound on it, but it's got me crossing the finish line. And it's pretty cool. Like, I'm just like it looks like I just, you know, went around to the corner to get some milk or something, you know. Edmund's chocolate donut, quarter Coca-Cola.
Coke, man.
Yeah, I do Coke, man. You know, Coke.
That's the Coke, right? Exactly. All right, well, listen, I think we're coming up on our time, but one last question. I'm going to throw you just a little curveball. And maybe you don't want to talk about this, and that's cool, but are we going to see a part 2 to Twisted Business?
I don't know. Should there be a part 2 to Twisted Business? I mean, what was left out in Twisted Business? I thought you were going to ask me if there was a part 2 to the Twisted documentary when Andy Horn.
Well,
people ask me all that.
You just got my next question.
Andy died, and so I don't know if that's the case. But a part 2 of Twisted Business, if I live another 70 years, you may.
Right. Okay.
You know, right now I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements. I just finished one down in Princeton this past week, which is great. I've one in October, one in November, and I'm really enjoying doing my speaking engagements because I do teach the twisted method of reinvention. That's really it. I want to, before we close, I just want to say, besides thank you for this, and we'll do more in the future.
Yeah, sure.
I want to thank all the guests who've been on up until this point, and also I got future guests coming up. I've got Kevin Connolly, who plays E on Entourage. He'll be a guest. Hopefully, Keb Mo, the blues guitar player, Keb Mo, will be on. We've got John Carter Cash. It's Johnny Cash's son coming up. He'll be interviewed later on this week, from probably the week after this one goes on. His story is going to be great. People always hear my Johnny Cash story, and he's the reason why the Johnny Cash story happened. So John Carter Cash will be on. We have the lead singer of Living Color, possibly Scott Ian from Anthrax. There's a lot of good people, coming up. And as long as I find really good, interesting people, we'll continue. Plus, we'll continue this because we'll have more questions coming up. We'll do another episode of this, and we'll also let everybody know what goes on. Until then, everybody, I want to thank you for listening to the French Connection Beyond the Music. I'd like to thank my co-conspirator in the social media world, Tor Caracappa, for being the inquisitor today. I'd like to thank Matt Mallinger, my producer. I'd like to thank my record label and my publishing company for letting me use my music. I want to remind you guys I'm available on Cameo, and I'm also, if you want to email me, if you have any other questions and you want to email me more questions to be read in the future, you just send it to askjayjayts. That's askjayjay. It's Jayjay. Askjayjayts. Guess what those TS stand for? They do not stand for Taylor Swift, motherfucker. Okay. askjayjayts@gmail.com, and we'll address those questions at a later podcast. And thank you all for listening. See you soon. All right, Matt.
Awesome.
Matt's asleep. Right? Okay.
No, that sounded great, you guys.
Yeah. So Matt, that was just about an hour. Yeah, just over an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Looks like it landed about that.
That was fun, man. That was fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that
For sure.
Sounded really good. The only one thing that came to mind with wanting to use the video, and I don't know if this would be worth redoing or not, but just the very beginning of your intro, JJ.
Yeah.
It slipped me to move my icon. So rather than having you guys how you look right now, side to side, it just had the placeholder with my name.
Right. So I've been seeing three screens the whole time. Is that what you're saying would be shown?
No, I guess, I thought you saw it the exact same, but on my end, I've got it. So it's just you guys side by side. So that's how 95% of the recording will look. It was just when JJ started, it just has not even me in it, just a placeholder that says Matt Mallinger.
So how much is that?
It was like 1 to 2 minutes, just literally your intro. So if you wanted to redo it, you could, or if that doesn't so much matter to you
So
guys,
is it all the way
it's
up to me introducing Tor? Is it that what it is?
Yep. Yeah, it was before Tor spoke at all. So it was just your introduction.
So then maybe I should redo it.
If you'd like, yeah, if you think it looks sharper, and it was just, you just kind of did your normal intro, introduced the episode, and then led into saying who Tor
Might
is.
as well.
All right, sure. So let me do it.
But
Ready?
sorry about that. That slipped me to move.
Yeah,
it.
well, it's okay. That's why there's always a delay in getting you paid. It's the same problem.
Let me ask you a question though. So Matt, because I was kind of wondering this as it was happening, with the guest, like let's set a precedent moving forward, because if everyone's going to be recorded and we're going to show these, should the intro be just, John, and then the guest pops up once he introduced, or is the guest sitting there in silence and you're kind of seeing this guy's face and waiting for him to speak?
Yeah, we could do either way. That's a good thing to
I think the
point
precedent
out.
should be that it's just the host, it's just John, and he's introducing the show and he introduces his guests. He does the whole buildup that he usually does. And then once he says the name, if it's easy enough for you to pop in the guest and then they're kind of revealed, like they walk out on.
Yeah, I think what I would do would just be toggle it between the two options, and the two options are, speaker mode or just having both of you by default. Great. So then even if they were to interject or JJ said something conversational during the intro, they'd pop in. So I think that would look look
So that's
fine to
great.
just toggle it.
All right, so let's take it from the top.
Okay. You ready, Matt?
Yes, yeah.
Are
and
you
want me
really
to do
ready,
that?
Matt? Are you really ready, Matt? Okay.
So should I'll just give that a shot then, doing that
Yep.
in this
Okay.
instance.
Ready? 5, 4, 3. Hey, everybody, it's JJ French, and you're listening to the latest episode of the French Connection Beyond the Music. You know, I have a lot of guests, a lot of great guests, a lot of people I really love, a lot of stories I like to tell, and a lot of connections, like last week's JC Curley from Gibson Guitars. That was really a lot of fun. This week, of course, is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to be answering questions that you have actually suggested. But before I get into that, I just want to remind you that I have my book out, Twisted Business, Lessons of My Life in Rock and Roll, available on Amazon. Also want to remind you the Twisted Sisters 40th anniversary of Under the Blades, a double album coming out later on this year. It's going to have the original Secret Records mix for those of you who love that record. And there's going to be a bonus second album that's going to have some really cool tracks. I think you're going to really love that. I also want to remind you that next year is the 50th anniversary of the band. I don't know where that's going to take me yet. We may talk about it today or in the near future. And also, as you all know, I have guests on who are authors, writers, actors. Coming up soon, hopefully, I will have Kevin Connolly, who plays E from Entourage. I'll have the great blues guitar player Kev Moe. I'm looking forward to that. We have a lot of great guests coming up. And I'm also available on Cameo for those who want personal greeting, and you'll know how to reach me on Cameo. Now, my next guest is my social media manager, whose name appears all over the place that you kind of see all the time. And his name is Tor Caracappa. So Tor, welcome to
Thanks
the
for
show.
having me.
All right. And you all know what this is about. Tor is going to just throw questions at me, and we're going to see where this takes us. So here we go.
All right. I think that was great.
All right.
Matt,
Perfect.
anything?
No, I think we should be
Cool.
good. Yeah, that was fun, and those were great
Hey,
questions.
before we all jump off, I've got a question for you, John. There's no audiobook of Twisted Business.
It's coming.
Yeah.
We signed a contract. It's
Great.
coming.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
That should be a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll mention it, but there's no audiobook coming.
Okay. And did the paperback come out yet?
No, but we're going to be coming out with a paperback as well.
Okay, cool. So we'll be doing re-release promo and stuff coming up.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Yeah, just
All right.
curious. All right, guys, thanks so much. This was super fun.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Matt.
Of
Appreciate
course,
it.
yeah. Let me know.
Thank you, Tor. I'll see you
All right,
guys.
you guys. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Soon.